for us the relationship between that initiative and the situation table that we've had in place? Are they complementary, duplicating, replacing? Just, I'm glad to hear what you're saying, but that seems to me the essence of what the situation table was attempting to do as well, but maybe I'm not remembering correctly.
There's a number of different, so the situation table was initiated by the police with all the community stakeholders sitting on that table. The purpose of that table is to identify acute elevated risk in people in the community to get immediate intervention and assistance to them. That could be housing, that could be mental health issues, that could be addictions issues, that could be a number of different things. And it's just meant as an intervention and a connection with that support. We have a number of other different tables that run on the healthcare side of the system, which is under the LHIN. The healthcare side is broken down to regions similar to what the OPP is in the province. So we are under LHIN 4, and each LHIN has a subgroup. And that subgroup has an anchor table that we sit on, and they also have 2 action tables underneath them that are designated to be particular to the needs of that subgroup. So what we have is the Health Links table that we sit on, which is that wraparound care for individuals that need multifaceted. It may be in addictions, it may be mental health, it may be geriatric, it may be a number of different care plans that they need, as opposed to the mental health and addictions, which is a priority in our community, with having an action group to speak to just that issue. And there are a lot of different tables, and there's a lot of discussions ongoing right now with what is the overlap between the different tables. And that's happening at the LHIN level to make sure we don't have duplicity. But the situation table itself is meant for immediate operational, as where the mental health and addictions is more of a director level systems issue, identification, barriers to providing care to people, and we can bring those issues to the LHIN for resolution, if that makes sense.
Go ahead. That, and I appreciate that clarification very much, and that's just to remind us as a board that part of our county is in a different LHIN, and I suspect the one you're referring to that we're part of with this initiative is the Brant, Hamilton, Haldeman, Niagara LHIN, and yet the west corner of our county is all within the London-based LHIN. So I don't know if this is happening in multiple LHIN jurisdictions or just the one that most of our county is in. But that's just an observation, Mr. Chair, for the board more so than staff, because I'm sure staff are aware of that.
Yeah, and the LHINs are very large to what they have, so that's why they've broken them into subgroups. Our subgroup is Haldeman, Norfolk, Brant. I'm right on that. So those are the 3 communities that sit on the subgroup committee, which works really well for us because our Schedule 1 facility with mental health is in Brantford. So it makes sense that all 3 of us are together.
So you're going to carry on with your report?
Yes, I keep getting offshoots there. We started our Citizens Police Academy on the 22nd of March. Just an update for the board. We have over 30 people, 30 members of the community that are taking part in that academy. The graduation that I believe historically we have had members of the Police Services Board attend for that academy is May 17th. So I just wanted to put that date out there to the board. And that again will be in the evening, and we'll have some further more detailed information as to where and when as well. I just wanted you to be able to put that on your calendar. In March, we had a zero tolerance, zero collision initiative. I believe I reported on it at the last meeting that we had because it was very early in March 2nd and 3rd. So you will find it in the previous report, but there were 67 charges laid as a result of that, and we were targeting high collision areas within the county. Also during March, we had the Easter weekend provincial traffic initiative that we were running in, taking part in Norfolk County. We partnered with the West Region Highway Safety Division, so we were able to get some of their units down there for the majority, down here for the majority of the weekend. They also brought with them specialized unmarked distracted driving vehicles for enforcement, and we were doing that within Simcoe and Delhi. As a result, over the 3 days, we laid 143 charges, 109 for speeding, 6 for distracted driving and hazardous moving violations. There was 15 other Highway Traffic Act, 11 insurance charges. I won't use CAIA anymore. 11 insurance charges, 1 3-day suspension in relation to alcohol, and we also had an ATV charge as well. So it was a very successful weekend, and we more than doubled our results from the initiative the year previous. So it was very successful. We also attended the Victim Services Haldeman Norfolk Gala. Actually, it was Staff Sergeant Varga that represented the detachment there. PC Yantha and DC Milton both received recognition awards for their work with assisting victims of crime at that gala. Tina Chalk was also an OPP guest speaker there, speaking on human trafficking at the gala as well. Victim Services Haldeman Norfolk are now known as Victim Services Haldeman Norfolk and New Credit as well. At the beginning of this month, we attended Region for a regional spring marine meeting. So we had the report back on the marine season from last year and some future planning on what the marine season is going to look for this year. We will be having the kickoff for that in Norfolk previous to the Victoria Day long weekend. Just to give you some highlights from that report, because the numbers were kind of staggering for me. Norfolk is the 3rd in West Region for the volume of calls for service that we have on the water in our marine capacity. So we are one of the largest marine calls for service detachments in West Region itself. Last year, alcohol enforcement, we were up 450%, which is good for our officers being out on the water doing a lot more alcohol enforcement. The downside to that is that there was obviously people out there that were operating for us to be able to increase our enforcement to that level. So something for the public to just take on for the summer, that will continue for this summer boating season, and we will have a high presence on the water and also looking for those alcohol issues. As a region, we checked almost 30% of the vessels in the entire province. We checked 8,700 vessels within West Region itself. In spite of all those numbers, we had 29 fatal incidents in the province, 8 of which were in West Region, which showed a 93% increase in marine fatalities provincially and 167% increase in West Region alone. The demographics, all were male in West Region, all fell overboard, all were small vessels, canoe, kayaks, paddle boards. We aren't talking about collisions, we're talking about people that are out consuming alcohol and not using flotation devices and life jackets. So this summer we will be doing a high media campaign for the alcohol and for the PFD use on the water. It's very simple for people to throw in. It's like a seatbelt in a vehicle. And we are seeing people just falling overboard and succumbing to either the cold water temperatures in the early spring or just not having the swimming abilities for whatever reason to stay above water. So that's just an update on our spring marine meeting that we had as well.
Any questions on that? I have one. You mentioned that the calls for service were up substantially in our area on the water. What's the distribution of those calls for service? Like, are they calls for service at major events like Potahawk, or are they more or less random throughout the summer months that you get calls for service?
Our calls for service themselves, and I apologize if that was a misinterpretation, the calls for service aren't up. We're the third highest in the region for calls for service. So our calls for service are actually down from the previous year, and they are down significantly throughout the region for calls for service. But in having said that, we've been very strategic with our marine program in the last 3 years, with knowing, with being on the water when we're receiving our calls for service. So we know the days of the week, the times of day that we need to be on the water to try to intercept those calls for service, to lower response times. And of course, hopefully our presence deters the calls for service when they're actually being made. So the calls for service haven't gone up, but the majority, and I think Joe and our Staff Sergeant Varga and Staff Sergeant Fashing would probably be able to speak to it the most. I don't think we necessarily see a huge spike during the events. They're continual through the summertime, and normally roll between that Thursday to Sunday, holiday, Monday period. Like all of our fatalities in the region were on a Thursday or Friday. 100% of our fatalities, Thursday or Friday. And right around 5 to 5:30, which is very significant. You would think they would be a little bit dispersed, but they're very tight time frames.
Wow, that's interesting. Thursday, Friday, 5:30. Okay, well, any questions or comments on that, or go ahead, Inspector.
So as everybody knows, we just had our PD13 event that ran last Friday, so it's very nice to report that it was a successful day with no significant events reported at all. The weather, as you all know, in the morning, and the weather reports weren't exactly that favorable, but the weather did turn nicer at around noon, 1 p.m. Staff Sergeant Varga was there for incident command, so he had control of the event. What I would like to do publicly is thank all the community partners who participated in the planning and preparation of this. This is very much of an eye-opener for me coming here, the amount of planning and preparation, not only through police services, but with all of our partners to make this a safe event. So I would like to thank everybody for that. I'd also like to recognize Acting Staff Sergeant Ange Ferguson. She was the lead planner for the event, as well as Staff Sergeant Fashing and Staff Sergeant Varga. They were the ones that put together the planning through the communities with Ange as the lead here. So I would definitely like to thank them in this forum. What we also tried to do during PD13 for the first time was put up, I think I was telling the board, put up the speed spy units to see if we could track traffic flow and volumes to the events. So what we were able to tell with that is there was just over 4,500 incoming vehicles during PD13. Now we tracked it between 12 a.m., so the morning of the event up until midnight itself. Those are estimates. We believe, if anything, it's going to be over that amount, but just so you know, there's about 4,500 incoming vehicles that we had, about 3,700 outgoing, so it tells you that about 1,200, sorry, my numbers are off there. I'm not going to try to do math right now. 800 people actually stayed longer than the one day. And when we looked at it before, a lot of people came in the Thursday night as well. If you remember, the weather was really nice on the Thursday night. So what we hope is in the future we can use these traffic counts to assist in future event planning, size of closure required, depending on the volume of traffic that we have coming in, and so on and so forth, as well as resource deployment. So we hope to continue using them. In July, I think we might run out of storage space for the number of vehicles that we'll have coming in and what we expect, but we're going to try it and see how it goes. So yes, very, very successful event. I think what I'll do is I'll just move into...
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, something just popped into my head that I wanted to comment and ask about. I was down during the day at PD13 and spoke to some officers right at the bottom of Main Street by the Arbor who were manning traffic control there, and I asked the individuals what detachment they were from, and those folks were from Perth detachment. So my question, I guess, to staff is, how many officers did we bring in as part of the provincial contingent for this PD13 event?
I'm just translating because you probably can't hear. There was 165 officers involved in total. Now that also included our detachment, but external was, to us, was how many, Ange? Do you know? 60. So roughly 100 officers from outside of Norfolk County that came. Yeah, uniform. That's not AGCO, our biker enforcement unit, our, our emergency response team members, and that's just frontline.
So we can keep going on your report.
What I'll do is I'll go to the statistics that you have here. The overtime that's in your package, I realized, Mr. Chair, that the provincial numbers that you had requested weren't put in, so I'll just go over the overtime, but Staff Sergeant Fashing has the numbers that you were requesting the provincial side. So I'll go through, just do the highlights, and then I'll have Staff Sergeant Fashing speak to the numbers that you were looking for from the last. So for overtime for 2018, dollars spent to date is $63,317.50, which represents a 17.25% spent of our total budget to date. And then, John, you have the provincial numbers.
Mr. Chair, I do. So our total overtime expenditure for March was 704 hours, and of those hours, 173.75 were provincial hours.
So the 704 that's on page 19, that number is going to be restated? So that's an aggregate number. It hasn't been split between local and provincial?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so next month it's going to show 704 minus 173, and we'll have another column that will show provincial.
Correct.
Okay.
For auxiliary, to report on auxiliary policing hours for the month of March, we had our auxiliary members dedicating 439 hours of volunteer service. In relation to the Crime Stoppers report, to date there's been 123 anonymous tips received so far this year. The numbers since inception, I like going over these all the time when we're in a public forum just because they're absolutely excellent with the numbers. So since inception we've had just shy of 2,100 arrests, over $42 million in narcotics seized, and just over $5.5 million in property. And over 6,100 charges laid as a result of these tips going through Crime Stoppers, and just a reminder to the public that this service really within their community is invaluable, and a lot of the information that is provided through Crime Stoppers is acted upon through our Community Street Crimes Unit. So please continue with putting those tips through. They're very helpful to us. In relation to Hagersville High School is having their Student Crime Stoppers breakfast planned for April 20th at 8 a.m. Crime Stoppers are continuing with their communication through Eastlink Cable and 92.9 The Grand and CHCH televised spots on cold cases. Fundraising, they are having a shredding day. I announced this at the last meeting that we had Saturday, May 12th. And what we've decided to do is to join with this shredding day as a part of the OPP and do another prescription drop-off day at the same time. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in our upcoming events as we move on. The Spring Gala is to be held on Thursday, May 3rd. That's at the Jarvis Community Center. And that's the update for your Crime Stoppers. In relation to our statistics and analytics, all of these categories have reported either within or below projected ranges, and I'll go through each individual category next. This is except our Mental Health Act calls for service, which we'll talk about specifically in relation to what the increases have been for that. So for assault events, we did expect 19 events. We actually had 13 reported, which showed us below the projected range for March. Domestic disturbances, we expected 49 events. 47 were actually reported, and we were within the projected range. Break and enters, we expected 13 events, and 13 were actually reported, which puts us within the projected range. For frauds, we expected 14 events, but a range between 9 and 19. 9 actual events were investigated, which again puts us within the projected ranges for fraud. Mischief events, we expected a range of between 23 to 27. 22 actual events were investigated, which shows us just slightly below the projected range. Theft of motor vehicles, we expected 13 events. Sorry, this is theft from motor vehicles. We expected 13 events. 12 were actually reported, but it was still within range, so we were within the projected range for March. Theft of vehicles, we expected between 5 and 9 actual events, and 9 were reported, which again puts us within the projected range. Theft under, we expected a range between 33 and 47. 37 actual events were investigated, which put us within the projected range. In relation to illicit drugs, we were expecting a range of between 6 and 12 events. 7 actual events were investigated. During our drug events reported within the projected range for March. In regards to drug investigations, the Norfolk Haldeman Street Crime Unit made 3 arrests, laid 10 CDSA, Controlled Drugs and Substances Act charges, and 6 criminal code charges. Total value of drugs seized in that investigation alone was $48,000, with a total amount of cash of $1,600. The street crime unit was also involved in assisting Kapuskasing OPP. As a result of information received, 2 people involved in a series of Property and Controlled Drugs and Substances Act-related crimes were arrested. These crimes range from Alberta to southern Ontario. As a result of the arrests, drugs, cash, and a significant amount of stolen property, including several stolen firearms, were recovered. Total amount of recovered property is estimated at $150,000. And the arrest resulted in over 60 criminal code and Controlled Drugs and Substances Act charges. The arrested parties are still under investigation from several under police services in relation to their crime spree as well. It was a very significant arrest by our street crimes unit. Moving on to traffic and collisions. When I look at the total number of collisions, we're within a projected range at 70 for March. We are showing a year-to-date increase in our total volume of collisions of 8.6%. Property damage collisions reported below the projected range in March. However, we are seeing a year-to-date increase of 14%, so that January and February were quite high and are still pulling us above that increase line. Non-fatal collisions for March reported within the projected range. We had 9. And we are also seeing a year-to-date decrease of personal injury collisions or non-fatal injury collisions by just over 10%, which is very good news. Non-fatal collisions for March ranked as follows. We had 2 that were in relation to fail to yield right away, 2 improper turn. Then we go 1 each for inattentive, ability impaired by alcohol, speed too fast for conditions, lost control, and there was a medical physical event of one of our drivers that was injured. Fatal collisions for March report within the projected range. We had 1 fatal collision in March. It was a single motor vehicle, single occupant collision. Currently, we sit at 1 year-to-date for fatal collisions. Last year at this time, we sat at 3. So we are seeing almost a 67% decrease in our fatal motor vehicle collisions so far this year. So between our number of personal injury collisions and our fatal collisions coming down, that is very good news. For impaired driving, we were expecting 6 events. 6 events were actually reported and investigated, and we are within the projected range for March. For Mental Health Act events, we expected 36 events with a range between 25 and 47. During the reported month, we had actually 55 events that were investigated. These 55 events translated to 350 hours for their investigation, and the year-to-date time so far in 2018 per Mental Health Act call for service is 6.5 hours. Mental Health Act events in Norfolk County reported above the projected range for March. In reviewing the Mental Health Act events, there were several clusters of events that involved repeat calls to deal with the same people. Some resulted in apprehensions or voluntary escorts to the hospital. After receiving medical care, several of the parties returned home, resulting in subsequent calls to the residents by police. For focus patrols, we currently have 2 open focus patrols for crime. We still have our cottage watch on the go. And as of the end of March, 21 officers have dedicated 169.25 hours to the focus patrol. And there have been 10 reported break-and-enters in the area, cottages, boathouses, and seasonal homes during that time. And we've been running that since the 22nd of December. This is also the new focus patrol that we have started. This is in relation to the break-and-enters in Norfolk West, which is the Port Rowan area. It's been generated in response to break-and-enters that have been occurring there, as we heard from Mr. Beck. So we will have, at the next PSB, we will have a report back on that focus patrol and what we've dedicated. We have three open traffic focus patrols. 2 are the ones that we report on, which is the Highway 3 section between Simcoe and Delhi, and the other one, which is Highway 24, that we speak about quite often here in the PSB. So to give an update on those numbers, because we actually concluded our quarter numbers. So on Highway 24, 42 officers have dedicated 626 hours, 391 charges, and 28 warnings since the inception of that focus patrol. I have all these numbers for you as well, Maureen. So that has been in effect for the previous year, so those results would close off the year of that focus patrol. On Highway 3, we've also had 42 officers that have dedicated time to the focus patrol, 347.5 hours, 98 charges, and 30 warnings that were along the section of Highway 3. And we have the new focus patrol that we spoke of on Angling Road in Townsend, and we will again be reporting on the conclusion of that one at the next Police Services Board. Speed spy studies that we've had, you're aware of the Angling Road one that we did, and we've also, as I reported, used them during the PD13 events to track motor vehicle counts and things going to and from the events. In relation to upcoming or noteworthy things that we have on the go, we currently have a gun amnesty ongoing for the month of April with the Ontario Provincial Police. That's throughout the province, not just in Norfolk. So unwanted firearms are potential hazards to our community, and these guns, should these guns be stolen during break-and-enters, they could be used to commit crimes and kill or maim people in communities we serve. We're urging everyone to surrender unwanted firearms and ammunitions for destruction without fear of enforcement action by making an appointment in advance. This will reduce the probability of injury or accidents if police handle these weapons instead of having participants bring them directly to police buildings. So please, under no circumstances, if you're turning weapons into the gun amnesty, that you bring them into the detachment. Please contact us. We will have an officer actually attend and make an appointment to pick up those weapons. It also includes pepper sprays and knives as well that we'll be accepting. And that'll be running again until the end of April. We have a Crime Stoppers luncheon upcoming tomorrow that we'll be attending. We also have on Tuesday, April 24th, we have members of our Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau and OPP Corporate Communications that will be attending Norfolk to announce the OPP opioid strategy, and they'll be holding an engagement with the community and media at that time. So there are invitations that will be going out to both yourself, Mr. Chair, yourself, Mr. Mayor, and all of our local media, as well as all of our community partners for the announcement and an engagement, which will basically be a conversation about how do we tackle this issue within our community and try to come up with some good ideas as a community for moving forward between
What was
the
the
police
date
and
and
the
time
community.
again?
That is April 24th. It's next Tuesday at 11:30. It's at the Greens at Renton, and formal invitations will be forthcoming. I'm supposed to receive them today. Our next tea with the OPP will be Thursday, April 26th, and we will be in Port Dover from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the last thing I have here is we will be running, as I was mentioning with the Crime Stoppers Shredding Day, we've decided to partner with CAMHS and the Public Health Unit, as well as Rolston's Pharmacy, and we'll be running a prescription drug drop-off day. So as people come through for the shredding, they will also have an opportunity to drop off any unused prescription medications that they may have at home and are looking for a place to actually get rid of them. Interesting statistics that 1 in 4 teenagers have reported misusing prescription medications that they have obtained from their own home. And between police, community partners, medical professionals, volunteers, and citizens, we must continue to work together to reduce access and availability to these prescription medications. So if you do have those sitting around at home, please come by the event and drop off those medications for us as well. And we'll have a report back, hopefully to the PSB and to the community in a media release, exactly how successful that event will have been. I think we still had to go over I think I neglected the traffic statistics that we had at the back of the report. So the foot patrol, I didn't go over. The foot patrol for March is showing at 367.75 hours for this year. We're showing a total so far this year of 1,115.75 foot patrol hours. We have nothing to, especially with this weather, we certainly have nothing to report on the bicycle patrol. School events, we've had 38 in March for a total of 124 so far this year. The traffic statistics for March haven't uploaded. That's the one where we have a 6 to 8 week delay, but we do have the numbers in here for February, which we wouldn't have had at the last meeting, so I'll report on February for the traffic. So the distracted driving charges we have there of 2, racing charges of 129 speeding charges, 3 seatbelt charges, and we've had 18 impaired driving incidents.
Any questions for the inspector on those? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Inspector, just on the foot patrol, and again, I'm casting my mind back to the deputation we had here earlier this morning. If I'm reading this correctly, in Port Rowan, so far this year, January, February, March, and I realize they're showing 5 hours in April, but we've had about 110 hours of foot patrol in the Port Rowan area so far this year.
Yes, and we had a total of, it looks like 326 for 2017 as a total. So it certainly does look higher this year by the year end.
How does that occur? Does the officer in his or her cruiser go down, the cruiser's parked, and then he or she gets out and just walks, whether it's the downtown area, they may do foot patrol hours in the villages or other neighborhoods? How do you decide on where the foot patrols will happen within a community?
Generally, it occurs as you described, Mr. Oliver. The officer will park and simply go out on foot patrol in the community. And that's done on a more random basis. There's also times where we'll have focus patrols that are particular to foot patrol in a particular area as well. So it's usually done one of 2 ways.
I've got a question too. I mean, I know in an aggregate, the foot patrol is down significantly from 2017 for January, February, and March everywhere. And I noticed that the speeding charges are down significantly despite the focus patrols that you have described. And that would suggest to me system stresses about the amount of time available for road patrol or foot patrol. So do you have a comment on that?
I have looked at the number of patrol hours. When we look at our patrol hours for January and February of 2017 versus January and February of 2018, I'm just saying January and February because that's what the traffic statistics are reported on. We're down 24% in our patrol hours, but when we look at an overall distribution of where our hours are being directed, we see a great increase in administration and assist on calls. So what that looks to me is a lot more administration time having to be spent by officers. And we even look at the increase in the number of hours. I think last year we were up for mental health occurrences at 4 hours. We're now up to 6.5 hours per occurrence. So the administration we see going up, and the assist on calls we see going up. So the necessity for 2 officer calls. We see both of those increasing. So there's a number of different components. The traffic charges themselves, we're really trying to, with the focus patrols, be visible in a certain area and taking a different mindset instead of just the number of charges that we're laying, what is the impact we're having on public safety, which we see the property damage collisions increase. We see the personal injury and fatality collisions decreasing. So to me, what that tells me, because we're putting people in areas to do traffic enforcement where we are seeing those personal injury and fatal collisions, that we're there at the right times doing the right enforcement. We're having the impact, but the charges may not be the same depending on what we're trying to focus on in those areas.
Other questions for the inspector? I'm curious about the alarms, especially with respect to Mr. Beck's presentation, because they are statistically significantly higher than they have been. So what's happening in false alarm world that they are spiking, especially when, I mean, he was referring to having camera images of people and all sorts of things. So I don't really get that. And I was kind of wondering whether you had a comment on that.
And I'll get the input from both the operational staffs as well, but we always see in all the communities, I print off different statistics for each individual community we have in Norfolk, and I think we have 22 different set of statistics that we look at when we talk about, when Staff Sergeant Fashing was talking about looking at hotspots and trends and things that have popped up to us. When we look at that, alarms is always our number one in every category with the 911 calls that we have as well. So they're always high, but I don't know if Staff Sergeant Fashing can speak to that.
No, I really don't have anything to add to that. No explanation as to why the increase at this time, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I mean, it has been trending down the last couple of years, so I was surprised to see a number of months in a row where it was statistically significantly higher. So if there is anything in the operation of alarms that is affecting that, I mean, it should be, with the state of technology, it should be carrying on down. So I'll just put it out there.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. We did have a meeting with Norfolk County bylaw regarding the alarm policy and notification, and we've made some attempts. And I think, Ange, you can verify we're trying to streamline the system so that the notifications are easier and we can get false alarm warnings and messages out.
Any other questions for the inspector on her report? I guess I have one more. On calls for service, page 44, staff hashing is referred to before unassigned hours. Is there a significant component on the year to date that would be unassigned that would lead us to believe that the total weighted of 11.523 was significantly under what it will ultimately be?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I didn't verify what our actual count was for the month of March, so I couldn't give a figure on that. I see that we've confirmed 1,011 billable calls. So I don't have what the actual calls for service are.
Sorry, I was just handing Staff Sergeant Fashion the actual, I pulled the numbers here, so he's just not aware of it. So for March, our actual number of calls for service were 1,817. And billable, you have the numbers there.
And so we still don't know which of the 1,817 might ultimately end up in the March statistics that have not been assigned.
I don't know, John, if you can.
The differential will be between the actual calls we did, which is 1,817. Those are the calls we responded to, both proactively and reactively, as opposed to the 1,011, which is what the county's actually being billed for. Those are going to be the calls that fall within the described categories you see there. And the others fall outside of that.
But some of them might be ultimately assignable.
Ultimately, depending on upon approval and ensuring that they're categorized correctly.
Okay, no, that's fine. Other questions for the inspector on her report? Any questions for the inspector on any other subject? Seeing none, if I could have a motion to adopt her report. Moved by Charlie, seconded by Jim. All in favor? Yeah, absolutely.
You're always quick. My brain doesn't think quickly enough sometimes. When the inspector was telling us about at the beginning of her report, you cited a couple of proceeds of crime, both cash and narcotics, let's say. I've often wondered when cash is seized from criminals, let's say as a result of drug trafficking or whatever, what happens to that? Does any of that cash make its way back down to the local community, or does it go into some provincial pool of proceeds of crime? I'm just always been curious about that, because sometimes it's obviously substantial amounts that presumably resulted from drug sales within, in our case, let's say Norfolk County, and yet does that proceed money come back, if you like?
I actually worked in proceeds of crime or asset forfeiture for a short period of time. So yeah, if there's a victim involved, which normally isn't with the drug subculture, that's a totally different restitution issue. But if it's specifically seized as proceeds of crime, upon conviction there has to be an order signed by the Crown to turn that money over to a provincial coffer. That provincial coffer funds all projects, high-level drug, organized crime projects that we run throughout the province. So if you were to have one within Norfolk County, that would be funded by a portion of those funds.
Any other questions for the inspector on her report? Any other business? I see the note about the Zone 4 meeting, if any member can attend on May 1st. So if we could move on to question period. Monty, do you have any questions? Boy, there's a surprise. Seeing none, if we could have a motion to move to closed session. Moved by Dave, seconded by Jim. All in favor?